Hi, welcome to Rock and Metal Invasion. My name is Steve. Coming up on the show today, I'm doing hard rock and heavy metal albums that were on the Billboard Top 200 35 years ago, August 27, 1988. So basically, I'm going to look at the Billboard 200, the 200 album charts from 35 years ago, back in August of the 27th of August in 1988. Because it is so different to what it is now. So if, I don't know, you probably haven't bothered to look at the charts recently. Charts seem to be way less important or way less interesting than what they used to be. But, you know, these days, the Billboard 200 album charts is full of lots of greatest hits and Taylor Swift, basically. I mean, if you look in the top 30, I think it's got like 7 Taylor Swift albums in it. So, you know, it's really not what it used to be. So I'm going all the way back to 1988, pretty much exactly 35 years ago, and highlighting the hard rock and metal albums that featured in that top 200. You know, this was a really, metal, hard rock was very popular at this time. Hair metal especially was growing in popularity. And you're going to see when I go through the top 200 just how many hard rock and metal bands were charting. And, you know, if you could get your album in the top 200 or 100 or, gosh, you know, the top 10, you're doing pretty well. So anyway, let's have a look, and we'll start from 200 and we'll work our way all the way down to number 1. So let's have a look at the charts from August 27th, 1988. Okay, let's go. I'll just get this up on my screen. Okay, and here we go. All right, so the first one that's coming up here that's of interest to me is Samantha Fox coming in at 199. Now, I know that she's not hard rock or metal, but she's a bit of a favourite of mine, a bit of a guilty pleasure. And I don't actually happen to have that album, not like some people who have every Samantha Fox that you can get on vinyl. But I do have this one, I must admit. That's actually all I have got. It's the gift pack, and the reason I've got it is because I do like the song "Do Ya Wanna Please Me," which actually is a bit of a hard rocker, and I've got the extended version on here as well. And of course, you know, "Touch Me, I Want Your Body." That was a bit of a classic back in the day. So as I go through this, I might also talk about some of the pop stuff as well that I've got in my collection that I actually did happen to like. But I was pretty much, by 1988, only really into the sort of hard rock, especially. Not so much the thrash. There'll be some thrash metal that comes up. I wasn't really into that at the time. But yeah, a lot of the hard rock, what we call now hair metal, is definitely into all of that. So basically every hair metal type band that comes up on the charts, I do have in my collection. All right, so Samantha Fox. Anyway, it's a bit of a funny one to start off with. That's that's at 199. And you can see if you look at the screen capture here of the charts, you can see that it lets you know where the album was last week, what its peak position was, and its number of weeks on the chart. So if we look at Samantha Fox, for example, she's actually been on the 200 for 25 weeks. Her peak position was 51, and last week she was at 167. All right, next up, Corey Hart. I'm not going to go through every one, of course, but we'll say Corey Hart, Sunglasses at Night, when that came out, I think it was around 83, 84. That was a popular one for me. All right, but then, so we've got some pop stuff coming up here. Thompson Twins, the greatest mixes. A couple of the Thompson Twins actually used to live in New Zealand. But here we go. Here's All Systems Go by my main man, Vinnie Vincent. Vinnie Vincent Invasion. Of course, I am Rock and Metal Invasion. I wonder how those two things got together. So 193. Now, this is probably a real disappointment for Vinnie. You can see last week is at 165. Peak position 64, which is, I guess, not too bad. But and it's had 15 weeks on the chart. But this album I don't think is as successful as the previous one. But and this one, of course, had Mark Slaughter on vocals. But there we go. All right, moving on. Now, I was a bit surprised to see this on here. I'm the Man by Anthrax. To me, that's not an album, but you could also, on the Billboard Top 200, you could have EPs on here as well. I definitely have noticed that they did include EPs. So, yeah, I guess that's what that was. I don't have that. I think I do have it as a 7-inch single somewhere, but yeah, not as a EP. And I think that ends up on their like A's and B's album, something like that. Anyway, moving on. Escape Club, Bruce Springsteen. You'll probably see quite a few names you're familiar with. Now, I don't have this, but this is Violence, quite a popular thrash metal band from the late 80s. I think that's their debut album. Yeah, debuting at 180. Oh, no, actually, it was not debuting. It was at 186 the previous week as well. Moving on. Rick James is even on here. Some more thrash with Death Angel, Frolic Through the Park, Soundtrack, Bull Durham. Yeah, just keep going. Now here we go. This is the next one I've got in my collection. So, Inside Information by Foreigner. Now this is not the usual opinion, but believe it or not, this album is my favorite Foreigner album. I love this album, and in fact, that run that Lou Gramm had in the late 80s into early 90s with this album, and then he had 2 solo albums, and then the album he did with Shadow King. They are 4 amazingly good albums. So I just think it was an incredible run of albums that he had there. And I know that, this is, for most people, not one of Foreigner's better albums, but it's my number one for me. Granted, I'm not a big fan of the earlier stuff, and usually that's the stuff that most people like. I've got I think I've got them all, but I guess I didn't grow up with Foreigner in the late 70s. I just sort of heard it later on, and I just thought, yeah, it's okay, good radio rock kind of stuff. Yeah, but this was more my kind of thing. But I know for some people they got a bit too radio friendly, perhaps. But this is just good hard rock, AOR. And Lou's voice is so great, and I just think for this kind of music, Lou's voice just sounds amazing, and there's some really good songs on here. I really like the title track, actually, Inside Information, which Mick Jones actually wrote that one. But yeah, Heart Turns to Stone. That was a single. There's a music video for that. Great one. Anyway, I'm not going to go into it too much because I think I will probably do a show about those great, what I consider great run of albums, the Shadow King, the Lou Gramm solo albums, and this album. It's just, yeah. And the previous Foreigner album, which also Agent Provocateur, I like that one too. Not quite as much as this, but I like that one, and that's also not one that's necessarily liked that much. But there we go. All right, moving on. So we're at 171, and just out of interest too, how's this album gone? This is Foreigner, a big band, right? You can see here, peak position 15. It's probably a little bit disappointing for them, for a band of their sort of stature. And they've had about 36 weeks on the chart. That's quite a long time. I'm sure this must have gone at least gold, if not platinum, because so many weeks on the chart. So even if a band doesn't get into the top 10, if they're on the charts on the top 200 for a good year, the chances are they're going to go at least gold, maybe platinum. But again, for a band like Foreigner, perhaps only got to 15, and now be at 171. Last week they were 137 too, so they're dropping a little bit. Maybe that's not so good for them, but anyway, moving on. So, big album here, Pink Floyd. Nearly 50 weeks on the chart. I don't have that one though. Nuclear Assault, some more thrash coming up here. Interesting. Not a lot of thrash comes up once we get into the top 100, but from 100 to 200, there's quite a bit. So I guess it was popular, but it wasn't as popular as the sort of hard rock or hair metal bands, as you will see as we go through the charts. So yeah, Nuclear Assault Survive at 166. We'll just keep going through because I don't know too much about Dougie Fresh. Joy Division, of course, pretty good band, but don't have them. But I do have number 159, Whitesnake. Now, this was a massive album. You can see 72 weeks on the chart. Peak position of number 2. And, Last week it's at 151. It's probably going to stick around on that top 200 for a while still. Here it is, of course. Great album. All right, moving on. New Kids on the Block. Yeah. Frehley's Comet, second sighting. So last week it was at 142. So it's done. Sometimes you could tell by looking at the charts, what was going on with the band, or whether they were moving up or moving down. Possibly moving down now. It's 12 weeks on the chart. Peak position is only 81. Frehley's Comet never really took off big time when you think about it. Of course it's Ace Frehley, but I actually really like the work that Todd Howarth did on these albums, and he has a lot more influence on this album, but I don't mind it at all. I like his songs. Fallen Angel, New Kind of Lover, It's Over Now, Time Ain't Running Out. They're all his songs, I think, and they're probably my 4 favorite songs off the album. So, there we go. Anyway, moving on. Right, next one that's going to come up here is a guy called Jimmy Barnes. Now, he used to be in Cold Chisel, vocalist for them. You can see that in America, he wasn't particularly huge. Like, peak position 104, 12 weeks on the chart, and last week he was at 150. He's at 153 this week, so maybe he's dropping down. But here's the album here. This guy was huge in New Zealand, and especially, of course, in Australia, where he's from. And I really like Waiting for the Heartache. That's a good song. I think he got Desmond Child to help him out with songwriting there. And also Jonathan Cain from Journey, and maybe even Neil Schon as well, I think. And Too Much Ain't Enough Love, that's another good one. It's not super heavy. It's, that sort of AOR, hard rock sort of sound. Or also, like, when he does rock it up a bit, you might consider it sort of pub rock sort of thing. It's just that good sort of, that kind of stuff that other Australian bands like the Angels, or even, probably the Angels. It's not AC/DC, but it's if you know Cold Chisel, it's similar to that sort of thing. Good solid meat and potatoes rock, but he never really quite took off outside of Australia and New Zealand, but he still tours here and is still very popular. All right, but probably borderline to say it would go into the hard rock metal category, but definitely, like I say, he had the guys from Journey writing for him there, and he had Desmond Child as well. Another person who had Desmond Child is next up actually on the list, Cher. So his self-titled album, Desmond Child contributing songwriting. So is Bon Jovi as well, and the reason it's in my collection is because I do like the song We All Sleep Alone and Bang Bang. So that's at 152. All right, keep working through here. A bit of a classic at 150. We've got Operation Mindcrime, so peak position 50, which is a bit surprising. Maybe it does come back into the charts and chart higher, but I don't know that it did. It's one of those albums that it stuck around on the charts for a while, and word of mouth it became more and more popular, but and of course now it's definitely regarded as a classic. But at this stage it's at 150, and it's only been on the charts for 15 weeks. Last week it was 138, but this is close to a perfect album, every song. Concept album as well. Great stuff. All right, moving along, quarter of the way through. So I'm just going to obviously move through these albums that I don't know too much about. I've got some more thrash here. I do actually have this one, Under the Influence by Overkill. It's at 143, and then you got Testament at 142. You can see both Testament and Overkill, they haven't actually got into the top 100 yet. So, and that's what tended to happen with these thrash bands. They had some charting positions, but they were often in the 100 to 200 position, not the top 100. Unlike the next band, Joshua Tree, I don't actually have that album, but it is a classic, isn't it? And you can see last week, weeks on the charts, 74. It was a massive album for them. Right, we'll keep moving on here. I don't actually have Blue Oyster Cult, but you can see I just really never got into them, but it might be something that happens later on. Weeks on the chart, only 2 weeks on the chart, and they're moving in the right direction. They were at 140 the previous week, but next one is interesting because Bob Marley and the Wailers Legend, the best of. It's at 133, weeks on the chart 46. that album is actually on the Billboard Top 200 now. It's like 87 or something like that. So that's what I'm saying. You know, like the charts these days are a bit crazy. It's just full of a lot of greatest hits, really. And you know, granted, you know, this is a bit of a timeless album, and you know, I guess it from time to time it might chart, but it's the charts these days are just full of these kind of greatest hits type albums. This Bob Marley greatest hits best of, it was huge here in New Zealand, very popular. Anyway, moving on. Iggy Pop, surprisingly not that successful if you think about the fact that its peak position was 110. It's a bit of a surprise. All right, so not a lot of, here we go. Here's some more hard rock coming up. Yep, here we go. Hurricane, Over the Edge. So peak position was 122. So, you know, 123, it's been on the charts though. So been in the top 200 for 18 weeks. So it's sticking around there, but yeah, that's that one there. Good album. I think the next one is even better, but it's a good one. Deep Purple, Nobody's Perfect. That's basically greatest hits. I don't have that one. I do have the best of, but not that specific one. So moving on. DRI, I was a bit surprised to see that in here. I didn't realise, you know, that they're not doing massively well, but still 6 weeks on the chart, peak position of 118, which is where they are right now. So yeah, I'm not quite sure what these stars mean. It could mean that they're making good progress or something. I'm not quite sure actually what that means. Award, what is it? Gains in weekly performance. There we go. So it's had gains in its weekly performance. It's got a star next to it. There we go. So that's what that means. Okay, anyway, moving on. Hey, it's Kingdom Come. All right. One of my favourite bands. And this album was their most successful. Peak position of 12 and 24 weeks on the chart. But yeah, and it's probably dropping away now. But yeah, for a while there, they looked like they were going to be huge. And then they got a bit of backlash for sounding like Led Zeppelin. All right, moving on. What have we got next? Randy Travis, Prince, of course. Oh, here we go. Sorry, I'll just get back a bit here and check I didn't miss anything. Because an ad just came out. There we go. So we've got some ads coming up sometimes, which makes it a little bit tricky as I scroll through here. Yeah, Prince, Carly Simon, and here we go. Yeah, Iron Maiden. So Iron Maiden at 105. This would be, for me, their best album. But yeah, a very successful album for them as well. Although you can see they're not huge in the States. Peak position of 12, 18 weeks on the chart. And last week they were at number 83. So dropping down a little bit. But yeah, I really like this album. It's the first Iron Maiden album I got into. And yeah, still probably my favourite. All right. Don't have the King Diamond, but King Diamond you can see almost breaking the top 100. In fact, did the previous week. So previous week was at 89. That was his peak position. And you know, still very popular, of course, King Diamond. So had some popularity there back in the day. I thought this was interesting. Melissa Etheridge, 99 is her peak position at the moment, but I'm sure she's going to chart it much higher, of course. I actually have that album. Really like it, especially you know, the songs like The Way I Do and similar features. Seen her in concert, it was good. You know, back in the day, back in the sort of early 90s. Yeah, you know, at this stage I was pretty much into rock and metal, but you know, and she's definitely in the rock category, isn't she? But I'd sort of, you know, more hard rock and metal, but I really like Melissa Etheridge. Got no idea who this person is. Never even heard of that person, but there we go. UB40, of course. Tiffany. Yeah, I know Tiffany. Joe Satriani, Surfing with the Alien. I don't have that. I'm not so much into the instrumental albums, but it was very popular, wasn't it, back in the day? And 29 was its peak position. 41 weeks on the charts. So it was a pretty big album. Yeah, and then, of course, the next one, Judas Priest, Ram It Down. I do have that one, of course. I like this album. Carrying on, of course, from Turbo. There's some similarities, but it's also different. Perhaps a little bit heavier to Turbo. But for me, probably not as good, but still some good songs. Yeah, peak position of 31. Last week was at 78, so you can see it's starting to drop away a little bit, and yeah, I don't really think it really gets back much more into the charts there. Impellitteri, that has, Chris Impellitteri, I'm not sure I'm saying his name right, sorry about that, Chris, but Graham Bonnet on vocals. He sounds great on this, and it's also got Chuck Wright from Quiet Riot, Pat Torpey, he goes on to be in Mr. Big, and of course Phil Wolf on keyboards. Yeah, it's not bad. I don't love it, but it's worth having in the collection. And you can see here, it's broken the top 100. It's at 91 at the moment on the charts. All right, let's keep moving on because there's still quite a bit to get through, believe it or not. All right. I thought this was a little bit surprising that Europe Out of This World had a peak position of 76, and this is its debut. So this is it debuting on the charts. Here it is here, debuting at 76, and their previous album had been huge for them. So I thought that was a bit of a surprise. But, I guess maybe it was a bit different then. You didn't necessarily debut high on the charts. You kind of had to get a bit of singles momentum, perhaps, to get a bit more radio airplay. But for the fact their previous album had done so well, The Final Countdown, I was a little bit surprised that it debuted at just 76. And I think it does okay. The album ends up doing okay, but nothing like their previous album had done. All right, let's keep going. Move through this because until we get to some hard rock or metal. But yeah, here we go, White Lion at number 69. They did really well, didn't they? I mean, 49 weeks on the charts, so that's a lot of time to be on the charts. And but peak position of 11, When the Children Cry was probably what really broke them. So yeah, got that album. It's pretty good. I don't love it, but it's good. I like Hungry and Lonely Nights. That's a good song. Good album. Of course, Whitney Houston was huge, of course, at the time. REO Speedwagon, they were massive, weren't they, back in the day, even, in the early 80s. Not so much in the late 80s, but their hits album has been released. Okay, now Slayer, South of Heaven. So peak position is actually 57, which is a bit surprising. But weeks on the chart 4. Maybe it's going to go a bit higher. It's still sort of growing. Britney Fox, weeks on the chart 6, and peak position of 55. Yeah, this is a fun album. This is their debut album. And I think it goes gold, at least gold. That does pretty well. Another album that also does very well. So we're coming through quite a lot of hard rock and metal now. Lita Ford at 53. 28 weeks on the chart. And of course the big hit for this one was Close My Eyes Forever, with a debut with Ozzy Osbourne. Quite a few coming up now. So we've got Joan Jett, Up Your Alley. That was a good comeback for her again. Desmond Child helping out with the songwriting on this one, I think, probably helped. And the hit song was I Hate Myself for Loving You. 14 weeks on the chart. I think it sticks around on the charts for a while though. Another album that was, again, Desmond Child. So he was really starting to gain popularity. As Jimmy Page there. I don't have that one, Outrider. But we'll get to the Aerosmith that's coming up. Oh, yeah, it's a wee way away. I don't have Striper and God We Trust. Believe it or not, that's probably a bit surprising for some people. Just never got into that album. I've had it and just thought, no, it's just not doing it for me. So don't have that one, so I can't show you that. But there we go. 7 weeks on the chart, peak position of 32. Okay. So there's a few here to talk about that I actually don't have. So Run DMC. I do have their album, the one that has the song, the Aerosmith song on it. I'm quite into that. I was into that in the time back in the day at the time. And Robert Plant, I don't have that album, but I've heard it quite a few times. There's some good songs on it, but I'm more of a singles person when it comes to Robert Plant and his solo albums. But yeah, so this is what I was going to talk about. So it's coming up now, Aerosmith, Permanent Vacation. Yeah, so Desmond Child, again, he was really featuring a lot on the albums that are charting. So yeah, he comes in, helps them with this album. And yeah, they do really well. So you can see 50 weeks on the chart, peak position of 11, and last week it was at 35. So it's a real good comeback for them. I mean, Pat Benatar, I've got her greatest hits. I do like her, but yeah, she probably, that's one of her lesser successful albums compared to her previous ones. Now, I do have Michael Jackson, I got to admit, I do. There we go, Michael Jackson, Bad. I mean, he was massive, wasn't he? 49 weeks on the chart, peak position of 1. The main reason is the Dirty Diana, the song Dirty Diana, song he did with Slash. That's a great song. So that's the main reason I like that album and like Michael Jackson in general, because he usually would have one sort of good hard rock song on his album at least. Yeah, all right, let's keep moving through. We're nearly there. We're nearly to the top 10. And when we get to the top 11, when we get to the top 11, you'll be amazed how many hard rock bands are in it. 26, Savage Amusement by Scorpions. That's last week it was at 25. It's probably a bit of a slight disappointment, but it still did pretty well. I think it still ends up going platinum. 17 weeks on the chart. It did make it to number 5. It's a pretty good peak position. But probably just didn't have the big hit on it that they were hoping they'd have. Debbie Gibson. Yeah, there we go. She had a bit of popularity there. Cheap Trick. Never really got into them too much, but I do like the song The Flame. It's off this album, and you can see they're having a bit of success there. Dirty Dancing, that was huge at the time, wasn't it? So this is actually more Dirty Dancing. Like one Dirty Dancing wasn't enough. Yeah, so here we go. Right, now we get to the top. I'm going to say the top 11 because basically in this top 11 there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 5. 5 of the top 11 would be basically could qualify as hair metal or hard rock albums. So let's quickly go through it. So number 11, Cinderella, Long Cold Winter. That was a huge album for them. So this is their peak. They're at their peak position right now. And then at number 10, Poison. Their peak position, believe it or not, was number 2. They're at number 10 here. Open Up and Say Ah. I mean, even Richard Marx potentially is a little bit in the hard rock category, but I don't have that album. Then you got your Dirty Dancing. Then you got your Van Halen, OU812. That made it to number 1, but 11 weeks on the chart. Yep, so they're doing work with George Michael. This is a bit of a surprise. Fresh Prince and DJ Jazzy Jeff. I don't have that one. But number 4, a band called Guns N' Roses. Yeah, I think we know them. So, yep, that was huge, of course. 53 weeks on the chart. They had made it to number 1. That's at number 4. Don't have the Steve Winwood. But, yeah, here we go. Hysteria by Def Leppard. Of course, that had been to number 1. 54 weeks on the chart. Last week it was at number 2. So there we go. So much hard rock and metal in that top 11. It's unbelievable, isn't it? So when you think about the popularity of bands with that sound at the time. And I'll show the number 1 album because I've got that as well and I really love it. Tracy Chapman. Yeah, it's a classic album and very difficult to get on vinyl. Quite valuable on vinyl. Interesting enough these days. All right, so there we go. So that's just the albums from the top Billboard Top 200 from 35 years ago that I have in my collection. And interesting going through the charts, isn't it, from that time ago? And I mean, the charts back in those days used to be so interesting and something I would follow. And yeah, I just don't follow it these days at all. I just had a look today just because I was going to do this video just to have a look in a comparison. And like I said, it's just greatest hits and Taylor Swift pretty much make up the top 200 these days. But yeah, there we go. I might do something like this again, maybe for a different time period, maybe looking at singles. But yeah, hope you enjoyed that. If you haven't hit the subscribe button, you like this kind of content, make sure you do that. Leave your comments. Let me know about some of the albums that came up on that top 200. What do you think of them? Do you like them? What do you think about what's going on with the charts these days, or your memories of following the charts back in the day? All right, that's it for now. We'll catch you later. Okay, see ya.